Hello and welcome to the Grizzled Warmaster. My name is Doug, and wow, what a difference just a couple of days makes. I just released a video a couple of days ago, kind of going over some of the reveals we were getting, and here we go. Monday morning, GW drops the core rules as a PDF that you can download. You just have to click on the link in the article that they put out today, and then you give them your email address, they email you a PDF of the rules. So we now have the vast majority of the rules. The only thing that isn't in this is the battle plans for matched play. But everything else is essentially here. So there's also been quite a number of the bigger YouTubers got early copies of the Dominion box sets. Some of them were able to build the miniatures already. Quite a few battle reports out. So there's a lot of stuff for 3rd edition already out here. Sunday, Monday stuff coming out. So it's exciting, and yet somewhat disappointing as well. All right, folks. I am mostly going to go through these core rules in order of the book, but I do want to cut first to the chase to the biggest issue with 2nd edition, and I am sorry to report that the shooting phase has not changed at all, and in fact shooting has gotten even worse. So if you look here real quick, shooting phase, these rules are exactly the same. You can shoot into combat if you are within 3 inches. You know, basically you have to target that unit. You've still got Lookout Sir, subtract 1 from hit rolls. Doesn't apply to heroes with a wounds characteristic of 10 or more. There's no, like, heroes have to be the closest stuff. There's nothing protecting heroes in shooting. Shooting hasn't changed at all, and shooting got worse with the Unleash Hell command ability we got down here. Don't get me wrong, I like that command ability, but it is going to be super oppressive against some armies. This should be Overwatch from 40k in my opinion. You should not be getting just a -1 to hit. It should be a 6 to hit. And I hope that within, well, it's probably going to be a year. If they ever get around to FAQing this and changing this rule, it will probably be a full year and we'll get to 2022's General Handbook. Maybe not. Maybe they'll recognize it. Maybe they'll just double down and they're just like, nope, we're not changing it. But right now, yes, the changes to all-out defense do make a lot of armies more resilient to shooting attacks, but not enough. Not enough to see the shooting meta decline at all. Lumineth are going to be super oppressive. It's just, yeah. This is the one thing there's a few things that are kind of weird. This is the one thing that's truly disappointing. Now, I will make a video later. Now that we've got so much, we've got the War Scroll cards for everything that was in Dominion. We've got the core rules now. So we've got lots to look at, lots to make videos about. So I am going to make a couple of videos that are my top things that I like about the new edition and the top things I dislike about it. And we will also do a review of the Stormcast units and the Cruel Boy units. But I just wanted to point this out right here, right up front, that this is super disappointing. All right, we're going to start off with going through the book in order, or going through the core rules in order. You know, the first few like 4 or 5 pages are just standard stuff that, you know, generally most players already know. You've got the player's code and the core rules. So here's the player's code. Basically, don't cheat, don't lie, don't disrespect people, just don't be a jerk. And then we've got the idea, some of the core concepts about what a faction, a battle tome, and a battle pack is. Battle pack is the only one that's probably new. And that's basically, are you playing open war, or, you know, open play, matched play, or narrative play? But otherwise, you know, that's what battle pack is. So it'll also have included in the battle pack, as we see, is the like I forget what it's called, Triumph of Generals or something. We'll see it when we get there. It's basically how you put together your army, which will change slightly. I'm not even sure if that's in the core rules because it's a match. You know, they each have their own. So it defines models, friendly and enemy models, remove from play, units, war scrolls. Basically, some of the core vocabulary you need to know to play the game. So you can skip most of this to get in. If you've played before, you can generally skip probably the first 7 or 8 pages. We've got some interesting things here where we talk about abilities and effects and phases. One of the things, some of these are, you don't want to freak out too soon, like simultaneous effects. If 2 or more abilities would happen simultaneously, the player who is going first applies theirs, then the opponent does theirs. But if they are contradictory, the last one to be played takes precedent. However, that does not apply to strike first and strike last. These are covered someplace different, and essentially the need to know there is they cancel each other out. So they don't follow this contradictory effect rule, but everything else in general will. So, yeah, there's some weird stuff going on that we'll have to kind of work out as we play, because not all of these make sense. Because these effects are not the same as, so if you have something that gives you a plus to hit and somebody gives you a minus to hit, those cancel each other out as well. You don't just apply the minus because it was applied second, if that makes sense. So this is going to be one of those very rare, it's abilities on war scrolls that, you know, kind of have weird interactions. All right, moving on. We talked about deployment, the difference between reserve units and summoned units. There are a lot of, when we get to how battles are played, there are a lot of objectives that you can score. They're called battle tactics, I think, that can only be scored on models that were in the opponent's army when they were set up, when they were built. So summoned units won't score those objectives often, not necessarily always, but in what we've seen so far. All right, we've got the turn sequence broken down, but let's look at command abilities. This is one of the biggest changes. First, we've already seen this general, like, how many command points you get. Basically, first player gets 1, second player gets 2, and then if your general's on the field, you get another command point each hero phase, not just your hero phase, each hero phase. So at the start of turn 1, first player will get 2, second player will get 3. Not at the same time, but you know what I mean. Basically, when you use a command ability, you spend the command point, and then the model with the command ability issues the command. The unit that is the target receives the command. And there are some rules about this. You cannot use the same command ability more than once per phase. You cannot issue more than one command to any unit. And I think you cannot use the same command ability. Model cannot issue more than one command per phase either. So basically, it's going to limit how you can't stack command abilities, essentially. Although I did see a unique one. If you have a character who has a command ability that activates an aura and units fall within that aura, they are not receiving that command, so they can still be affected by that command. With them still being able to activate another command ability themselves. Because remember now, unit champions can give out commands, as can heroes, as can generals, as can totems, and the ranges are here. So commands are going to be quite a bit different. The other unique thing is that we hadn't seen prior with any of the rules previews, and I don't think even any of the articles, command points reset every round. So at the end of the round, any unspent command points are gone, much like relentless discipline points for the OCR Bone Reapers. You get a bunch throughout the course of the round, you have to spend them all, and they go away, and then you generate new the next round. So that's really unique, and I will tell you up front, I'll do a separate video on this, but Bone Reapers have been nerfed to the bottom of the pile. They're going to struggle in this. You can't give more than one unit of Mortarch Guard shield wall, because that is a command ability. So it's gonna be tough, guys, for Bone Reapers. All right, we've already seen the hero phase stuff. In fact, the heroic actions. We saw the rally command ability in the articles. Now this is in the command phase, so you can target one unit with the rally ability, only one unit, and then that unit can't be given another command. So that could matter. A lot of the old battle tomes have command abilities that are given out in the hero phase, so that'll be something to pay attention to. That's going to be one of the toughest things, is keeping in mind who's issuing commands, who's receiving commands, and which commands are being done, so that you don't overbook, you don't accidentally use the same command ability twice, that you don't give one unit more command abilities than it can take, you don't issue too many command abilities with one. So anyways, movement phase largely unchanged, except for when you retreat you cannot run. They are two separate things. You can either choose for a unit to run or choose for it to retrieve. It cannot do both, which could end up in situations where you can't get yourself more than 3 inches away from the enemy. So that'll be interesting, especially with the new unit coherency rules. You may find it hard for bigger units to get themselves out of combat through a retreat. So, and then we've got, again, throughout the book, they break down the command abilities that are appropriate to that phase, and usually there's one that's proactive and one that's reactive. And redeploy, we had seen, is the reactive one here, which is if somebody finishes a move within 9 inches, you can spend a command point and move a unit a d6 inches away. So it's going to be interesting to see how that interacts with some of the stuff going on. All right, we've seen the unit coherency rules. They were earlier in the chapter, and we saw it in the community articles. If you have 5 or less models, you just have to be within 1 inch of at least one other model. If you have more than 5, you have to be within 1 inch of 2 or more models. So that's going to make piling in any miniature that is on a 32 millimeter, technically a 28 millimeter, but I don't think any units in AOS use 28 millimeter bases. But anybody on anything bigger than 25 millimeter base, 1 inch weapons won't reach across it. So it will be difficult for larger units of big based models to all get to attack. So that's something. These rules are really designed towards encouraging you to take smaller units. I don't know what the design philosophy was there, but yeah, that's the reality now. Again, we've got some just clarifying, moving up and down terrain, flying over, things like that. We talked about the shooting phase. Charge phase remains unchanged, except for the Unleash Hell ability. So if somebody charges within 9 inches and you don't have anybody within 3 inches, you can shoot at a -1, which is not impactful, really. Well, I mean, it can be, but it largely isn't. Let's see. Combat phase, we've got very broken down, easy to understand order of battle. You've got the start of the combat phase where you would use abilities. You've got the strike first go, then people without strike first or strike last, then people with strike last, then the end of combat phase, and any abilities that might. Oh, nice change to the pile-in. I was really hoping for this. This is really cool. You now have to finish no further from the nearest unit, not model. So that'll allow you to, especially like big monsters, singles, as long as you don't go further away from the unit you're engaged with, you can just kind of circle around them and, you know, maneuver your position with that 3-inch pile-in. And it'll make 6-inch pile-ins more impactful. So those armies that have those 6-inch pile-ins, or even 4-inch pile-ins for, like, I think rats have 4-inch pile-ins, those are gonna be useful now. More useful, I should say. They weren't bad, they just were very finicky and tough to do. All right. Again, these rules for attacking largely unchanged. Clarifying that if you have a weapon that has a minimum range, the unit has to be wholly within minimum range to not be able to be targeted, which I think it was before. It just may not have been super clear. Got you can fast roll. Again, mostly the same. There are a few like really big, very sweeping changes. We're going to look at a couple here on this page, and then a ton of it's exactly the way it was before. Here are some of the biggest changes. Hit rolls, wound rolls cannot be modified greater than +1 or -1. There can be multiple pluses and or minuses stacked, just like in 40K. You add up all the pluses, you take away all the minuses, and it can't be more than +1 or -1 at the end of all of that. You also can only improve saves by +1, which is kind of a bummer. I was really hoping this was not going to be here, so that you could, you know, armies that have the access to, you know, I throw a Mystic Shield, I use all-out defense, I spend an Ether Quartz or whatever, make myself essentially invulnerable for a turn. But nope, you can only get +1. It does, obviously, Ren still exists, so that you can have far more than -1. All right, we got damage, allocating wounds. As we had already seen, all-out attack and all-out defense give pluses to saves, not rerolls. So you're going to have to count on your army and unit abilities to give you rerolls. You know, units with shields, units with dual weapons, you know, getting those rerolls. Or maybe heroes that hand out rerolls, things like that. Wounds largely remain the same. We got ward saves. Basically, any kind of damage prevention roll that is targeted to wounds and mortal wounds is now called a ward save. So if, you know, undead have a 6+ ward save, you know, same, you know, whoever had ward, you know, damage prevention rolls before, they will now be called ward saves. It does specify that when you're returning slain models, you have to set up the return model within 1 inch of a model that was not returned earlier in the phase. So you can't do the little chain onto an objective or something like that. All right, mortal wounds, healing wounds, that's all the same. Battle shock is largely the same. The only difference here is you can only use inspiring presence once. So, you know, no matter how many units are going to have to make battle shock tests, you can only inspiring presence them once. You can use other abilities that aren't command abilities, but inspiring presence only works once. All right, terrain, another big miss in my opinion. They essentially just kind of cleared up and stated things more specifically, but didn't improve terrain model, you know, rules at all. To get cover, you have to be wholly within terrain, which means nobody's base is hanging off. I really was hoping they would go the 40K route and you just had to be touching it. But nope. To be behind terrain, you have to be more than 3 inches from the attacking unit, and all your models have to be within 1 inch of the terrain, and they can't be able to draw a line to the closest point of one of their models to the closest point of one of your models without passing across the terrain. So for Wildwoods, for example, you would, if they can't draw a line to your miniature, then you're behind the terrain. However, Wildwoods aren't as good as they used to be, so they don't just block terrain. It's you've got to be more than there's got to be more than 3 inches that you go through. So even that's worse. Faction terrains, what it is, scenery rules. I thought they have them later. You still have to deal with the arcane. They went back to the base 6. They got rid of the extras. Maybe those will come out in the General's Handbook for, tournament play, but I hope not, because I think those scenery rules are unbalanced. But anyways, I talked about cover. You get a +1 to your save if everybody is wholly within the terrain and doesn't have a wounds characteristic of 10 or more. They define what defensible terrain is, how you garrison, essentially. I don't even... Large and very large, they just define what those are and that they count as 2 terrain features. Again, stupid. Wildwood terrain, basically, look at that. I guess the people in the second row are more than 3 inches, so they would not be able to see, but everybody else would be. Or be seen. So the unit would be targetable. All right. Garrett explains garrisons. They largely remain unchanged. They bring up demolishing because that now is something that can happen with the monstrous rampage and Kragnos. Objectives. We've got some interesting things here. One, it defines objective as the center point. It's not the edge of any marker that you're using. I think that's always been the case in Age of Sigmar, but they want to clarify that because it is different in 40k. Now, after setup is complete in the first battle round, you automatically gain control of any objectives you have models within 6 inches of as the battle starts, before anything happens. At the end of battle shock phases, you check to see if you're in control of objectives. Talked about contesting. Big change here. Monsters count as 5 models for the purposes of contesting objectives. But disappointingly, you have to be 5 or more wounds and not a monster to count as 2 models. So this is really just heroes and then big things like Kurnoth Hunters. Not sure what else qualifies in that realm, because there's a lot of stuff that with 4 wounds, but not very many with 5 that aren't heroes. Gives an example of controlling terrain. Terrain is you have to be within 3 inches instead of 6. So if you were playing a battle plan that required control of terrain pieces, you have to be closer. And I guess you have to control a defensible terrain piece to be able to garrison it. So there's that as well. Wizards. Big change here is they can miscast now. On an unmodified 2, they are going to take mortal wounds and not be able to cast any more spells that round. So that's a big change. Unbinding works largely the same. Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield both changed. We had seen that before. It's important to note here. Its caster is the target of Arcane Bolt. You can pick an enemy unit within range and visible to the caster. So it's the caster who is unleashing the Arcane Bolt after it's been cast on themselves. Mystic Shield's now a +1 to save. So there's tons of ways to get +1 to save, but they don't stack, which is very frustrating. Very kind of annoying that they changed everything. You would think that, give us something, leave Mystic Shield as the reroll and use cover and stuff that can't stack, but nope. All right. Endless spells, we've heard before, but they changed dramatically. You essentially all endless spells now are bound endless spells, like the Seraphon have, as long as they're within 30 inches of the caster. So as long as they're within 30 inches of the wizard that casts them, you control them, and you can move them. This is predatory endless spells. Endless spells, in general, cast exactly the same as they have. But predatory endless spells, you control them as long as you're within 30 inches. You move them in both hero phases, so they can be very impactful. So it's going to be more important than ever to shut them down. People with automatic dispels like Techless will be very, very important. Removing endless spells, here's the 3 ways you can get rid of them. They are essentially the same as they've always been for that. We talked about predatory endless spells. Priests can chant prayers, and much like some priests already have, and much like wizards now, if you roll a 1, you suffer a mortal wound. And I believe you can't chant any more prayers after that. Nope, it doesn't say that. Most people can only chant 1, but you have a answer value, so that's the 4 up, 2 up, whatever it is. You got a couple of built-in ones that everybody knows. And then invocations are essentially now the priestly version. Well, they always were. Priestly versions of endless spells, but only priests can banish them. So it might be important to have a priest in your list, depending on your meta. Again, here's the ways that you can remove invocations. We'd already basically found out everything we needed to know or that changed about monsters. And then we get to, how the war scrolls are put together. So again, these are largely unchanged. This is the way they were always. Faction terrain talks about setting that up. There's the part in the terrain area that's you have to be more than 3 inches from other terrain and 3 inches from objectives to set up your faction terrain piece. All right, let's go ahead and move forward to interesting note here that if you have a conditional battlefield role, which is basically you become battle line if you have a certain general, that unit loses whatever else it had before. So for example, if a Royal Terrorgeist is in Grizzled and becomes battle line, it is no longer a behemoth. So that's how they give it that rule that you can have more than 4 or more than whatever your limitation is, essentially. That limitation is no longer there for that specific model that gains the battlefield, that changes its keyword to battle line. Unique and single are largely the same. Allies seem to be a little different. Again, it's 1 in 4. You take them as part of your army, but now with the core battalions, they are part of your army, so can be included in one of the core battalions. There's nothing in here that restricts how they interact with the rest of your faction. Now, for the most part, well, they can't be the general, obviously. For the most part, most command abilities and most special abilities in your rule book apply to your faction through the keyword being in the text. However, the regular command abilities do not. So there's nothing in the rules that I've been able to find that says you can't give an allied unit all-out attack or all-out defense or any of that, or cast spells like Mystic Shield on them or something like that. So I think their allies are a little looser. You can do a little more with them, so that's cool. So I have the feeling this is going to be the most controversial part of the whole new core rules. In fact, actually just building armies in general. But the fact that you can't use any War Scroll battalions, that you build your army differently, I think is probably going to be the most upsetting to a lot of people. And we have seen the info on the War Scroll, the core battalions. Now, to be fair, the nice thing about this is everyone's on an even playing field. You do get a little bonus, and these core battalions are free. They don't cost any points, so they do not impact what you can put in your army. And everybody has access to them. Everybody gets the same abilities. So I have a feeling that while it might upset some people, it probably is good for the health of the game. So anyways, so free battalions, so there's no reason not to put your guys in it and get these things. And battle regiment, which is the big one here that can have 5 troops. And troops are not battle line. Troops are just anything that isn't a artillery piece, a monster, or a leader of some sort. So anything can be used to fill this out. So that's probably going to be very common. And that's the only way you can get 1-drop battalion stuff. The other one that's going to be pretty popular is this Warlord one. And that is because it gives you an enhancement, an extra enhancement. And enhancements are anything that you assign to your army when you're picking your army. So artifacts, spells, mount traits, command trait technically, but you can only ever have one of those. And prayers, and they say there's going to be some unique ones, but I'm not sure exactly what those are yet. So that one gives you both that and then kind of a free floating command point at some point in in one turn. And now I had questioned when I saw this, once per battle, magnificence, that's strategist. Once per battle, when you receive command points at the start of your hero phase, you get 1 extra one. I was like, well, why wouldn't you just use that in turn 1? Well, because they reset every round. So some rounds you may not want to, like in round 1, a lot of people are going to use the heroic action to give themselves an extra command, or try and give themselves an extra command point. But later on in the game, you're more likely to need to heal yourself or do other things. So that might be a turn where you're like, but I definitely need an extra command point, so I'm going to use strategist at that point. So that's a nice little buff. The other ones have cool things, but they are all essentially just using a command ability, an assigned one, either all out attack, all out defense, unleash hell, something like that. But it's done without being issued and without spending a command point. And since a command ability could only be issued once per phase, if this isn't issued, that means 2 people in that round or in that turn could use all-out attack or all-out defense or something like that. So those are also very good abilities. And let's see, we've again covered allegiance abilities, allied units. Here's where it explains what enhancements are. And then the next few pages? Oh, okay, yeah, tells more, like blah, blah, blah. Here's an interesting one, spell lores. Each time you take a spell lore enhancement, you can pick 1 spell for each wizard in your army from any of the spell lores available to those wizards. Each wizard knows the spell that you picked for them in addition to the other spells they know. So if you took that Warlord battalion, all of your wizards who got to pick 1 spell at the beginning of the battle can now pick a second one. So imagine Lumineth, where at least half their army are wizards. They're all going to get an extra spell. Then if they take the great nation Zatrek, they could all know 3. They could all know half of the spells in the spell lore and just have that utility. That's pretty amazing. Probably better than picking an artifact for Lumineth. And probably better for people like Tzeentch, or I'm not sure who else has really cool spell lores and would want to be able to waffle between them, pick different ones. But yeah, any wizard heavy army may want to consider that, or even a priest heavy army. So maybe Khorne, Khorne or Fire Slayers or somebody like that might want to, give all of their guys an extra prayer from whatever their list of prayers. So those are cool. But here's some of the generic. These are universal enhancements that anybody has. So if you don't like the ones that your Battle Tome gives you, you could instead pick one of these. And so you've got, here you go. We've got command traits, artifacts, spell lores. So you technically could take from this lore instead of your other one. Flaming weapon's a really good one. I could see people taking that spell. Okay, let's see. Prayers, triumphs have changed, I guess, at least a little bit. You can reroll charges. You can add 1 to wound rolls, which used to be reroll wound rolls, and then ignore battle shock. Well, no models from that unit will flee in that battle shock phase. You still make the battle shock test. You just, nobody flees if you make it. They did also mention a list of unique enhancements, but I'm assuming those are probably going to be battle tome specific. That they'll be specific to certain armies and be kind of unique. But we have no real clue about what those are going to be. Just that they will possibly exist. So let's go back here and look. Unique. Some set of allegiance abilities include unique enhancements. Each set of unique enhancements will explain how they are used. So again, that is something probably coming in the future in new battle tomes. That, something, I don't know. We'll have to see. It's going to be an interesting play space. They'll be able to introduce new things that you have not existed before and give us a mechanism to take, but not, have them, shift balance of anything too dramatically. All right, here's where we get the reference to battle packs, which is essentially what rule set you're going to play under. They basically, right now it's open, narrative, or matched. And those will tell you how you put together your armies, what special rules you have, as well as give you specific battle plans. So I'm assuming that, well, I shouldn't say I'm assuming. I could see a scenario where the tournament pack is a separate battle pack from matched play. And will have its own unique, maybe similar or maybe even exactly the same in certain aspects of match play, but that it'll have certain differences that make it suitable for tournament play. But we'll have to wait and see. And that is one thing that is not in this core PDF. You don't get anything from those 3 battle packs that we have so far. There's for open play, there's essentially open war cards, generic open war generators. So you generate, your scenario, your twist, and your goal or something like that. So you can do those just like a D6 roll. So it's very simple, pared down. Maybe they're going to come out with more open war cards for those people who like that kind of play. And then the narrative will include the new Path to Glory rules, which sound pretty cool. I've seen those reviewed by some of the people who have the actual book. Sounds like they could be interesting. And then obviously the match play has a lot of the stuff we've seen released on the community page, as well as things like grand strategies, battle tactics, and ways to score your objectives and things like that. All right. Disappointing bit down here. We still have mysterious terrain. Not a fan, but notice we've gone back to just the 6 basic ones. We've not got the 6 additional ones that give you like command points and things like that. So that going forward from here is just essentially an index and some other like minor stuff that not core rule related. It's just I think just more terminology like this. So that's it. That's the overview. This is largely, it's weird. It's a weird rule set. It's like the new 40K 9th edition, laid out very particular, very I don't want to say streamlined. It's not streamlined at all. It's actually expanded and very detailed and specific, and it's got good reference numbers. I haven't looked at the index, but the way they've developed it, I'm assuming the index is very thorough, which is not something you could have often said about Games Workshop products in the past, especially the way past, with like fantasy battles and things like that. Those books were awful for referencing stuff. But anyways, so it's very detailed. It is largely the same game with some significant but sometimes subtle differences. Things like the maxing out the plus or minuses to hit and wound and pluses to saves. The command abilities, that's a huge, and command points, that's a huge shift. Objectives are slightly different, especially in match play. How you score is way different. How you put together armies, way different. But these core rules are, you know, it's like an old familiar dish that's got a slightly new seasoning to it, and maybe a little hot sauce poured on top to get, you know, to spice it up. But it is a recognizable game. You could go out, if you master the command ability, command point section, especially that each hero or champion or whatever can only issue one order, each unit can only get one order, and each command ability can only be used once in any particular phase. All of those are in a particular phase. If you can master that and keep track of that, you could go play a game of third edition right now and probably not mess up that much, because that command ability section is so important to it. So if you get your rule book, you see how to put together an army, you master that command abilities, you remember that you can't go over +1 or -1 for anything but rend, you're ready to play. There's a few nuances that are a little different or a little clarified, but otherwise it is a very familiar game. Sometimes a little too familiar with shooting, for example. But anyways, let me know what you guys think after you've read through your core rules or just listening to this. Do you like the changes? Do you have anything that stands out as supremely good, supremely bad? You're very disappointed? You're really excited about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you would, please share with a friend. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.